Panic spread across northeastern Japan after a powerful 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck without warning, triggering tsunami alerts and forcing more than 90,000 people to evacuate as waves began hitting the coast. It was a night like any other across the wind-swept coasts of northeastern Japan. The days followed their predictable rhythm. The city lights flickered across Aomori Prefecture. Fishermen tended their boats along dark harbors, and on shore, life hummed with the familiar cadence of winter's approach. Residents had just begun to settle into the silence that only true night brings. Tranquility reigned, or seemed to, but deep below, the tectonic plates that shape Japan's destiny remained as restless as ever, shifting imperceptibly, accumulating the energy that would soon shatter the peace. At precisely 7:26 a.m. local time, those hidden forces were unleashed. What began as an almost inaudible disturbance became an inescapable threat. The tremor that erupted was unlike anything the northeast region had felt in years. In mere seconds, lives changed. The magnitude? An imposing 7.5, among the most powerful earthquakes to shake this part of Japan in recent memory. Alarms sounded across the region. Emergency lights flickered. Out at sea, the ocean itself began to respond, heeding the call of subterranean forces now set loose. What is it like for a country so familiar with disaster to brace, again, for the unimaginable? How do you wait, breath held, as fate teeters in the balance? Tonight, we relive the harrowing moments, minute by minute, as Japan is forced to reckon with nature's unyielding power. Tremor in the deep, the 7.5 strikes. Beneath the islands of Japan, the Eurasian and Pacific plates endlessly rub and collide, creating a landscape defined by seismic instability. Scientists track this ceaseless movement, preparing communities through drills and warnings, a necessary vigilance given the region's geologic volatility. When the next big quake comes, it is never gentle. That morning at 7:26 a.m., the seismic rupture occurred off eastern Aomori Prefecture. It arrived as a barely perceptible vibration, a glass trembling on a nightstand, a lamp's slight sway, but rapidly, subtlety gave way to terror. Walls groaned, glass shattered, buildings shuddered. The air was instantly alive with sirens and voices shouting in the half-light. One witness, holding her daughter as their home lurched, described how it felt as if the ground was twisting, trying to shake us off. Across cities and fishing villages up and down the coast, this was the nightmare scenario generations have rehearsed for. Japan's sophisticated warning network, efficient and hypervigilant, sent alerts racing across every device in the region: televisions, phones, radios, and public loudspeakers. Yet, even as residents acted out entrenched safety routines, each quake always tests them anew. Would this earthquake expose weak points in systems built from decades of hard-won lessons? Miles away, seismic sensors charted the waves of energy as they rolled outward in concentric circles, providing data to scientists monitoring the event in real time. Reports confirmed the worst, magnitude 7.5. In Japan, those numbers are never mere statistics. They're omens, reminders of past devastation, and warnings of what could come next. No two quakes strike in exactly the same way. For a country shaped by such events, the immediate response was unwavering. Brace for aftershocks and, perhaps more terrifyingly, tsunamis. The tsunami alarm and the race against time. The peril of a major earthquake by the Japanese coast extends far beyond shaking ground. Beneath the surface, the sea can become a silent accomplice, gathering destructive force all its own. In the aftermath, a secondary danger emerges that has, in Japan's modern history, proven even more deadly: the tsunami. Within moments of the initial shaking, the Japan Meteorological Agency issued a tsunami advisory. Across the affected regions, public speakers and emergency alerts delivered their concise, chilling instruction: leave for higher ground immediately. The words alone, even after years, are enough to stir old grief. In 2011, a tsunami utterly transformed the region, carrying away homes, schools, and entire communities. That memory lingers, instructive and raw. With the warning given, towns and villages along the northeast coast mobilized. Emergency vehicles patrolled narrow roads as first responders relayed urgent instructions. School teachers gathered children. Fishermen, where able, moved boats to deeper water or left them behind altogether. The evacuation was swift, practiced, and tense. Soon after, readings confirmed reality. Tsunami waves, first 20 centimeters, later rising to 70 centimeters, reached coastal monitoring stations. While these heights might sound modest, the energy of tsunami water is misleading. Even a wave several decimeters tall can sweep heavy objects, muddy streets, and cause dangerous currents. Each centimeter mattered, especially for small ports, river mouths, and low-lying areas with limited natural barriers. Authorities continually updated evacuation orders as the situation evolved. Around 90,000 residents, entire communities, were told to seek shelter away from the coast. Public transit ground to a halt in some places, with commuters forced to take to the streets. Some left calmly, others with a frightened haste only those who have lived through terror understand. Even with the most practiced response, each moment brought uncertainty. Would the waves rise further? Would a strong aftershock follow? Behind each set of eyes in the evacuation shelters, these questions simmered as they waited for updates in the chilly early hours. The human toll, injuries, and uncertainty. After every disaster, the first signs of devastation are visible in fractured infrastructure and bruised landscapes. But the deeper, more enduring cost is always measured in human experience. The pain, the disruption, the anxiety that lingers. As morning dawned and assessments began, initial reports indicated at least 30 people had been injured, some in the rush to evacuate, others from collapsing structures or falling objects. In hospitals from Aomori and neighboring prefectures, medical staff treated cuts, bruises, broken bones, and several cases of shock. The injuries were mostly moderate, but each one told a story: a hurried escape, a collapsed ceiling, a fall during the tremor's most violent seconds. In shelters, evacuees clustered together in gymnasiums and community centers, anxious and cold, but grateful to be safe. Aid arrived swiftly: blankets, packaged food, and medical assistance. Volunteers and emergency workers, experienced from years of drills and responses, checked on the injured and ensured the vulnerable. Children, the ill, the elderly were cared for. Some families shared accounts of being awoken mid-sleep, rushing outside in slippers and pajamas, possessions left behind in the scramble away from danger. Crucially, the emotional injuries ran as deep as the physical ones. For the many who had lived through previous disasters, each aftershock or update stoked new fears and revived old traumas. But resilience was also on display. Neighbors checking on one another, local businesses donating supplies, and relief organizations arriving with comforting efficiency. Still, beneath the surface, everyone wondered, would aftershocks bring more trouble? Had the worst truly passed, or was worse yet to come? Authorities continued to warn that aftershocks were highly likely and could themselves be strong. The science of quakes and the threat of the next megaquake. Japan sits astride one of Earth's most complex and volatile seismic zones, the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire. Here, tectonic plates push, pull, and grind with immense force, a ceaseless geologic paradox that brings both destruction and the land itself. Seismologists closely examine every major event, hoping to understand future possibilities. The 7.5 magnitude quake jolted not just the ground, but the scientific community as well. In Tokyo and regional earthquake centers, officials pored over data, measuring the distribution of energy, the depth and location of the fault movement, and potential implications for subsequent activity. One major fear after any significant quake is whether it may herald an even larger event. While the term megaquake is often used colloquially to describe the most massive events, such as those that ruptured regions in 2011, scientists emphasize that any significant tremor can increase the likelihood of aftershocks, sometimes including very strong ones. Officials quickly reiterated calls for preparedness, urging the public to remain alert. Comprehensive analyses of aftershocks and infrastructure followed. Dozens of aftershocks, some perceptible and others minor, were recorded through the night and into the following day. Seismic stations flagged ongoing tremors, maintaining a state of tension in the region. In the days ahead, authorities continued detailed inspections of critical facilities, dams, bridges, sea walls, and transportation links. Damaged areas received priority for emergency repairs and evaluations. Engineers in hard hats and reflective vests worked through wind and rain, checking for cracks, landslides, or hidden instabilities that could exacerbate dangers. Uncertainty dominated both public discourse and scientific analysis. Experts advised ongoing caution. While the largest quake might have passed, vigilance was mandatory. Communities at risk of landslides or further shaking were kept under special watch for prompt evacuation if needed. Evacuation: 90,000 on the move. Entire towns and rural hamlets sprang into action, a choreography learned over generations. The evacuation of approximately 90,000 people wasn't simple, but Japan's robust disaster protocols ensured order where chaos might otherwise reign. Emergency communication was relentless. Loudspeakers, municipal radio, and text alerts reached fishermen, office workers, school children, and the elderly alike. Police and local authorities moved block by block, making certain every resident got the message. Firefighters and municipal staff assisted those with limited mobility, while buses were hastily rerouted to ferry vulnerable groups inland. Roads soon filled with families seeking shelter in community halls, schools, and sports centers. Volunteers set out cots and heated drinks, easing the shock of sudden displacement. People packed what they could: documents, clothing, treasured mementos. Too little time for anything more. The sound of shuffling feet and quiet conversations replaced the earlier chaos. For some, the memory of evacuation 10 years ago or more compounded their anxiety. The national trauma from the 2011 disaster shaped both individual decisions and government strategies. Some evacuees chose to stay an extra night in the gymnasium shelters, not quite ready to trust the returned calm. For those living alone, neighborhood groups helped ensure that no one was cut off or stuck in high-risk zones. The government continued real-time monitoring. Special attention was paid to infrastructure at risk, especially where earthquake or tsunami could have weakened dams. Officials released updates throughout the night, carefully noting that while no widespread catastrophic failures were found, assessments continued as a precaution. As the day turned, the drama of exodus slowly gave way to the logistics of daily survival. Meals served on paper trays, children playing games to pass the time, volunteers organizing supply lines. The solidarity of communal life, so integral in Japanese culture, provided comfort even as nerves remained raw. The lifting of the tsunami advisory. Relief or reprieve? After hours of watching the coast and tracking offshore sensors, Japanese authorities were able to gradually scale back and then fully lift tsunami advisories by the following morning. The highest measured wave, 70 centimeters, hadn't caused catastrophic inundation, though minor flooding and debris were reported in places. In the affected regions, the lifting of advisories brought a palpable sense of relief, a sign that, this time, the ocean's anger had been less than feared. Families in evacuation shelters received the news by radio and smartphone. Some burst into tears, others simply sat quietly, processing the end to a long, fear-filled night. But relief was tempered by caution. Local governments maintained an active posture, sending engineers to check sea walls and riverbanks for erosion or damage, and focusing on confirmation that essential services could be safely restored. The condition of dams, where a breach might have compounded the emergency, was reviewed district by district. No large-scale failures were found, and repairs were initiated for less serious damage. For many, the return home was filled with mixed emotions. Some houses bore scars, cracked walls, fallen shelves, minor flooding. Schools and businesses, closed the previous night, reopened with limited operations. At local markets, safe signs appeared in windows, signaling an effort to restore normalcy. Yet the psychological mark remained, a tension that only time could ease. Parents reassured excited or confused children. Teachers reviewed earthquake response procedures, and communities began organizing discussions on lessons learned for future preparedness. In town meetings and informal conversations, the same question recurred. Were these events truly over, or was this only a pause before the next crisis? Living in the shadow of disaster. Living in northeastern Japan means living with a constant awareness of risk. Generations have learned to survive by preparing, rehearsing earthquake and tsunami responses until they are as familiar as any daily routine. Drills are as common as seasonal festivals. Children can recognize emergency sirens before they memorize their own addresses. School and community preparedness lessons are woven through education and daily life. The 7.5 magnitude earthquake resurrected hard memories and reinforced old habits. Many families revisited their safety packs, flashlights, bottled water, first aid kits. Neighborhood groups reviewed evacuation maps and checked public shelters. Established protocols ensured that support for the most vulnerable, those with disabilities, new mothers, the elderly, was planned and executed. But beyond the practical, resilience was something more, visible in late-night chats by lantern light, in meals distributed to those too frail to collect them, in the collective sigh of relief as first responders delivered updates in calm voices. Community ties, strengthened over generations shaped by adversity, provided comfort and continuity in uncertainty. The constant threat calls for a kind of patience, an ability to live in tension with the unknown. News stations filled hours with interviews of seismologists, analyses of the latest aftershock, and advice for coping with anxiety. Emergency authorities lent expertise, but even their best predictions acknowledged inherent unpredictability. Even as the most immediate crisis eased, authorities continued to urge vigilance. Schools maintained stricter drills in the days that followed. In some places, families chose to sleep with shoes and coats ready, just in case another alarm was sounded during the night.
The government, for its part, continued inspections of essential utilities and infrastructure. Updates regarding electricity, water supply, and road access were provided to reassure a still nervous public. Many found routine comforting, returning to work, school, and daily chores, even as aftershocks occasionally rattled the windows. Night falls, and the waiting begins anew. With the all clear sounded, television schedules returned to normal, and the hum of daily life resumed in fits and starts. Yet, beneath this apparent calm, a subtle unease persisted. The faintest tremor or a distant siren was enough to make hearts race and conversations stop. For the communities of northeastern Japan, there was widespread appreciation for disaster warning systems that worked as designed, and for the discipline and cohesion shown by citizens during crisis. Authorities and relief organizations earned praise for rapid mobilization, and the collective memory of 2011's devastation lent a seriousness to every decision, every evacuation that followed. Still, the scars, physical and emotional, ran deep. People cleaned mud from homes, patched cracks, and swept up broken glass, but the sense of vulnerability remained. In interviews with journalists and local officials, some spoke of gratitude for having been spared a greater catastrophe, others of new determination to prepare for whatever the future might hold. Schools became places for both study and mutual support, classrooms ringing with stories of shaking houses and brave evacuations, lessons interrupted by impromptu discussions on safety and self-care. At night, families gathered to review emergency plans and reassure one another against lingering fears. Nature's power, so vividly demonstrated yet again, inspired both humility and resolve. While scientists continued their analysis, local governments coordinated outreach and mental health support, aware that recovery after trauma is as much about rebuilding confidence as it is about mending walls. In the quiet that followed, the rhythms of daily life gradually reasserted themselves. Markets reopened, trains resumed regular service, and laughter, and perhaps even a sense of relief, began to creep back into public spaces. Yet, resilience in Japan is a living thing, renewed every time the Earth moves. As the region looked ahead, officials emphasized the importance of continued preparation and vigilance. No one could guarantee when or where the next tremor might strike, but Japan's people, shaped by history and experience, will be ready. The ocean, for now, was at rest, but its patient watch, like that of the land itself, would go on. And so, as darkness fell over the villages and cities of the northeast, another chapter of survival ended. Even as peace returned, the community braced, aware that, in Japan, the question is never if, but always when. With courage drawn from the past and determination focused on the future, the nation waits and watches, ready for the day when the land will move once more, and knowing they will face it together.